Hi there, I'm Tim Irvine.
And I'm Stacy Irvine. Welcome to the Totum Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Totum Podcast. Happy to have Dr. Dana Sinclair with us as our guest today. Welcome to the Totum Wellness Podcast.
Thank you.
You are a performance psychologist. You've worked with, maybe there's only one professional league that you haven't worked with at this point after reading your bio. So lots of professional athletes, elite athletes at the amateur level, which also doesn't really feel like amateur anymore. And I think between you and your husband, you've come by this pretty naturally because you are both were national team athletes yourself.
True.
You in field hockey and he in paddling.
In paddling, yeah.
Which
Flatwater sprint.
flatwater
canoeing.
sprint.
Yep.
That's right. Awesome. And I think that having gone through that, I'm sure there's this natural inclination to always be mindful of sport. And I know you did kin, but you started as in agriculture.
I did. I had to do a course correction there. I loved it, mind you, but it just didn't pan out.
Which is, we're from Saskatchewan. So
it
it's the
speaks a
typical
lot to us,
agriculture, kinesiology, psychology pathway. It's just like...
We're the only people that would say that.
Well, I love it. Thank you.
Two doctorates obviously focused on psychology and this idea of helping people be at their best. Published author with Dialed In, which is an awesome book. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Great.
You obviously worked with quite a few Olympians. You were in Paris this year. Curious about how did your athletes do with the tools that you were working on with them?
Well, I think they did very well with them. There's only a few that I push and talk to them about. And then, of course, they choose what's going to be best for them and what they need for performance context or for off the court as well. And I think that if you don't take care of some of those mental skills, performance is a lot harder because it's all about being able to do it under pressure, right? And they're all very good, but it's those pressure moments that you have to prepare for. And if you don't have some of those psychological strategies ready to go, it's tough. I mean, it's tough anyway, but it's nice to be sharp and ready to handle the challenges that pop up, especially in Olympics.
And are those different challenges than in, a World Series or a Grey Cup or those sorts of things, just because of the length of it, the complexity, the international focus?
I don't think they are different. I think it's just depending on what's happening in that environment. I mean, say in Paris, there were injuries. There was difficulty even trying to get medical help because we needed more people. We're trying to get access. So it worked out well, but the athletes, my athletes, the ones that I work with, sort of had to fight for a few things because something always comes up at the Olympics. There's lots of excitement and wondrous things, but there's equal parts drama and challenges as well.
That's interesting. So that's the behind the scenes stuff that you'd presume that there's this whole wealth of support that each athlete would have, but it doesn't sound like it's always that universal.
It's not always easily accessible, especially when the demand on the team, like the support staff, is maybe excessive or more than was planned for. Because remember, it's the Olympics still, and they don't have sort of the resources financially that other like professional teams do. So you sometimes have to cobble a few things together to get it done.
With your book, such a fantastic book, and then you published it and kind of started getting ready for Paris right away. I'm wondering if there's anything as a result of writing your book and maybe some of the research, putting the thoughts down, did anything change in the approach for getting the athletes ready for Paris? Did you have any new insights or anything that you say, okay, we used to do it that way. I don't like that way as much anymore. I'm trying something new or different. Was there anything new?
Actually, nothing that pops up because the process of writing the book helped me really get clear ideas and how to explain concepts that I thought were important. So I think that actually fueled me to do probably a better job preparing people for Paris, or, you know, understanding, listening, hearing what they really needed, and not giving them too much, listening to
Right.
them, getting them involved and engaged, and just taking it as it comes.
So focusing more on the communication and the delivery, and maybe, I don't know if this is the right word, but maybe after writing the book, it became very concise to you
Yes.
and you'd had the words in your head, coming out while you were writing. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate for sure. So it really helped me, I think, be better at my job.
Simplified things,
Absolutely.
right? Which I think when you're talking about these things, because they feel complex, right? And I guess the underlying mechanisms are complex, but when you can simplify complex,
It's harder than you think. And I do remember sitting out at sort of Canada House at the Tokyo Olympics, and I had some time, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start. I was still writing the book. I'll start part two. This will be a breeze because this is the bread and butter how to what I do every day. Holy smokes, was I wrong? That took
mm,
me longer than the first part of the book that was talking about certain concepts, because trying to simplify and get things to be actionable and practical and interesting, I really wanted to be careful with that. That was really important to me. So that took longer than I thought. But in the end, it's really helped me.
I know that in you have four skills. So I think this is part two of the book. Four skills that you talk about. The one that I think is really interesting is, well, they're all interesting to me, but one that sticks out is this idea of keep daydreaming, which I think if you just hear those words, you already get an idea of sort of what you're supposed to do, which is a little bit of the kid on his front lawn, tossing the ball up and diving and making those catches. And that part of that's a physical response, but part of it's just like they're looping this behavior that becomes true at some point.
Absolutely. And there are different types of daydreaming. So you can, that's sort of a more, that could be a highlight that you want to see, or trying to practice a skill in your head. But there's other things to daydream about too, about maybe responding in a contentious situation differently, being calm and composed, sort of fighting back when things are getting tough, not just giving up or, holding back. So there's all sorts of different ways you can look at it. But my interest in calling it daydreaming is that we all do it, but we should just be a bit more focused about it. And it doesn't take as long as people think. I'm talking about 5 seconds, 10-second little clips in your head of seeing how you want to respond or something you want to change. That's where the money's at, if you ask me. And even so, the research that I'm still involved in at U of T with the medical department, we looked at surgical residents and saw what happened when one group got some mental training, imagery, visualization, daydreaming, but a bit more extensive. And it turned out that those who got it were not only less stressed, but they had better outcomes. So
Wow.
it's super powerful, and it's really underrated in how it can help you change your behavior or draw you towards a goal.
That's fantastic. Are you familiar with Ellen Langer, Dr. Ellen Langer from Harvard?
No.
So she's a Harvard psychologist. Her research is all about health. So psychology as it relates to health. So she's very big. I think that probably the biggest topic is mindfulness versus mindlessness. So go about the same thing you've done, so many times, but you're not paying attention. You're just doing. That's the mindless approach versus what you just described sounds to me like it's you a more mindful, like, what am I actually doing here? How am I trying to help this person?
You have to think it through. I think if you want to change, or at least be able to get to your best when the moment matters, when it's really meaningful to you, you do have to pre-plan it. You do have to think about, there's a structure. You have to think about, okay, what's getting in my way? What are my hot spots? What really distracts me or derails me? Then, okay, what skills are going to help me? What are my strategies? Then I've got to put just a little plan together. So you sort of, bump it down to the simple sticky note plan that you've actually thought through, and it doesn't take you a year to think through or a month to think through, you can do it fairly quickly. And people just sort of avoid doing that. They just want to, not deal with the fears or the things that might get in their way or that make them hold back or the self-protection that we all have to deal with sometimes. And it's just a little process that if you take the time to face, you're better. You can be better that afternoon.
I think a lot of this can feel intimidating to people. And they think of this area of psychology that they don't really understand it. And so a lot of the athletes that I work with, they think that visualization is a big deal. You have to lie down somewhere quiet and you have to have half an hour. And none of them have half an hour to lie down somewhere quiet, right?
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what is really interesting about your approach. I'm also interested in applying these principles to people who are not necessarily competing in sports. So the surgeons is very interesting, or the medical students is very interesting to me. Can you explain kind of exactly, so the group that you had doing the mental training, what was it exactly? What were they supposed to do?
They were supposed to, we put together a script for a particular laparoscopic procedure. So they could read it, see it, go through it, get the image in their mind, see themselves doing it, practice for any crises or mistakes, and review and have a way to manage it, to, I guess, reconnect with what they need to be doing, to be able to get their focus back in the moment, because that's what happens to us. We shift over into, all these really made up fears and worries, and whether I can do it could be self-talk, expectations, etc. And we're no longer on the task. So I always talk about, okay, you've got to be able to shift when you drift. So when you drift back onto all those things, you need to have some sort of focus to get back onto task-related technique, tactics, whatever it is. That's the easiest way to draw yourself back into the task.
Shift when you drift is a very interesting way to put it. And I do think lately, a lot of the athletes I deal with are under 18. And this screen, like some of them actually, we say, leave your phones in your bag. Some of them will bring their phones in their pocket for a warm up. And you'll see them checking, or literally I saw a guy like FaceTiming his girlfriend during warm up the other day. I said, actually, as I picked it up and said hi to his girlfriend, I said, he's at practice right now. We're going to just make this call later. But it's incredible. And then you hear the research that potentially it really is impacting our attention span. And you think about kids at school with their phones. They do have them in the classroom. Whether we say they're not supposed to be there or not, they are there. Are you finding that when you have some younger athletes? Well, and look, we're all on our phones too.
Yes.
Is it affecting all of our attention span?
I think so.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How do we fix that shift when we drift?
Yes, you have to, but you have to think it through first.
Right.
There might be just, you don't have to invoke this huge strategy to deal with it. It's just pick one or two situations that, okay, this is actually not helping me, or this is getting in the way, or annoying someone, or breaking up my focus. Pick that situation and actually consciously figure out how you're going to manage it next time it happens.
Got it.
It's as simple as that. But again, if you just sort of give it lip service and think about it, it might happen, it might not. But if you actually think about it so you can decide what the next steps would be, what do I do in the moment when I want to grab my phone? Maybe I can take a different path.
Do you have a tangible example
Of that one?
Yeah, that you worked with somebody on, like just developing that, what seems like a simple skill set.
It is, but it's the same thing that you apply whether you're a surgical resident
Right.
or a kid in warm-up. It's the same thing. If you try to do it in the moment, might work, might not. Not reliable.
You got to do it ahead. Yeah.
A plan.
So our son plays hockey, and I think their warm-ups are better now, but they weren't very good at the start of the season. And I'm sure that their phones are in their pockets. So he would, before he even goes to the rink, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to get the most on my warm up. Okay, this is what it is. This is what the guys do. Okay, I'm going to be part of the team and do this, that, and whatever. But I have to do this piece, and this piece on my own
Mhm.
to make sure physically I'm warmed up and I get some mental engagement out of it.
Very
That's sort of
good.
the idea that you would do before you go into the ring.
Absolutely. And you certainly want to have, I mean, taking that into practice is great, but, having it in for competition and whatnot is key.
What about a situation that I think many of us are dealing with right now? I look at the women's soccer team in Paris,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a situation where you did all the right things. Your plan was good. You were ready to go. And then something completely derailed that plan. And I think we can look at a world we're entering as well. You could talk about politics. The politics will derail a lot of people's plans.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And again, it's something that can be so emotionally devastating.
Mhm.
But you still need to show up for your job, for your family, for your Olympic performance,
For yourself.
for yourself. What would you do in those, like, what advice would you give in those situations? So something big, completely out of your control has happened. You've been working towards this thing potentially your whole life.
Absolutely.
What now?
It's super meaningful, of
Mhm.
course, because everybody wants results. Everybody wants to be good at what they do. Getting the most out of yourself in those moments is tough. You have to be able to show up when it counts.
Mhm.
So, my approach really is you've got to go down to the individual level. And if you are doing what you need to do to execute and get the most out of you in that moment, that's all you can do. And you're responsible for being able to do that, because I think when something big like that happens, you can point fingers, you can say, well, how could I possibly be expected to perform, et cetera? Well, it's your choice. You have to decide what you're going to do. And for me, the consistent individual delivery of high performance is the key. You have to know what your role is and execute to the best of your ability, because that's how, well, that's great for you, but it's brilliant for the team. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's all about the team, team, team. You hear in hockey all the time, next man up and all this stuff. Well, I feel if you want a team that's going to produce, whether culturally or on the ice or wherever, you need to get to the individuals. You need to help them get to their best, because that's what's going to elevate the whole deal, the whole team. And I think
Right.
sometimes we go too much and worry about the team too much and talk about, I mean, performance culture is important, but we talk too much about, well, you need to do this for the team and you need to do that for the team. Well, no, maybe the team, the coaching staff, et cetera, needs to do this for you so that you can execute.
So you can be your best at the moment when they need you.
Yes. When the
Yeah.
pressure's tough.
That's fascinating.
It sounds like from a leadership standpoint, it doesn't matter if it's sport or
Correct.
business, that the leader has to acknowledge the individual that is part of a team. But
Yes,
hey, how can I help develop this person to be
absolutely.
aligned with the vision of the company? But ultimately, it's how can I help them be better at what they're doing here? And if I'm able to do that, then
You
there's
got
better
it.
engagement.
You bet. And, I think with talking sports, say, but again, it's the same no matter who you are, what you do. We all have to perform, and there's always pressure, and the same skills and strategies work, right?
hmm
So I think you have to be able, as a leader, coach, whatever, to communicate with your individuals. And if you push that off, I think you're in trouble. The best people I've seen out there talk to their people. They listen to them, they engage them. They might not agree with them, but they work it through with them. And, I've seen a lot of NHL teams too, where I've talked to players who are unhappy with their time on the ice and this and that. Okay, so we try to sort it out. Okay, the coach is requiring this from you. If you do this, you'll get more time on the ice. Okay, sometimes coaches aren't fair either, but we've got to come to some sort of agreement as to what's my role, what do I have to do, what's going to allow me to get that time on the ice. You got to communicate it to people, not just yell at them and say, you're out.
Well, and the lack of communication ultimately will derail the relationship because there isn't an understanding, and then if both directions, the frustration grows. And so I'm not being listened to. Player says, or employee says, they're not listening to me. Leader says, they're not listening to me, but there's just not enough communication. Is that fair?
Right. Or it's not good communication. And I think leaders have to step up in this regard because they have the power. And I think what a lot of people, whether it's work or the Olympics or a relationship or dealing with your teenager, whatever, I think people need to slow down because you can't listen longer if you don't slow down. People are always, thinking about their response, not hearing what the actual person is saying because they're too worried about what's going on in their mind and how they're going to combat this. Whereas if we can just back up and put the problem on the table and actually just listen a little bit longer to maybe make a better decision because you really hear what the intent of the other person is actually trying to say, okay, maybe you can handle it differently. But there's a lot of defensiveness that I think goes on in power structures. So
I like that you said slow down. And I think that that is something that is so valuable because I know with us leading a big team,
yes,
if something goes wrong, we will often hear, I kind of want, I was going to tell you that this was happening, but you're always so busy. And it's an interesting thing. And there's definitely some validity to that scheduling can be so hard to get people, together. And I think sports teams have a bit more of that built into their structure than maybe a corporation would. But it's a really interesting kind of elusive strategy. And we've talked about it with our team, even that we should have, a coffee morning or something. But it's also hard to get people to come in the time that is not their, kind of time designated to be at work. Have you thought of like any ideas on those things? Where's the time coming from?
I do think that is pretty tough.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of people to manage. But the one thing I'd say about sort of the example of, okay, but you're always so busy. Again, that to me is when you've drifted over into the hotspot distraction zone.
Right.
That's taking you away from what you need to do. That's squarely on the line that says excuses.
Right.
And the individual has to, again, be responsible for their behavior too. And if it's important and that's part of their job or they need to bring it to you.
And part of that's identifying what's the high priority for your highest priorities. We got to stay focused on those things and not drift over into those
Yes.
distraction
Well, when
lanes.
you do, you just need to not linger too long.
Right.
You need to shift back over in the moment.
Have you seen that Novak Djokovic clip about somebody asked him a question like, how are you? You're just the best at this.
Yes.
And he said,
I love
well,
that.
I've worked very hard at it. And like everybody, I drift within a match, and I've trained myself really hard to be able to come back to where I'm supposed to be, which if you're better at that as any kind of elite, insert whatever it is, it's got to be better than, like, if you're better at that than most people, then you're going to stay on task more.
Absolutely. And what I liked about that interview is that he actually stopped the journalist and said, no, that didn't come naturally to me. I've worked at this. I do get frustrated, but I have to be able to shift back.
I like that part too. That was great.
Yeah.
I am a human being that puts the work in.
But, and an aside to that really is actually 2 months ago, I was in prison. I was doing a book club. Don't you worry, with inmates. And
This
it
was going to get really interesting for a second there.
Wow.
And it was really fun and really interesting. And as I say, like, no matter who you are, what's going on, the same kind of structure and skills can work for anybody. I mean, these guys were talking about the skills that they had used after they read the book. One guy said, okay, I'm being released soon. And I nearly got into a mix with one of the guards, but I remembered, don't react, just do this or that. And he settled himself and he was able to go forth. Otherwise, it would have
That's
been a problem.
amazing.
Add more time.
So
yeah.
again, they're simple strategies. And if we can think them through just a little bit, again, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you can make a difference.
That is great advice. I love that.
They also like breathing and yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. Breathing was big.
Interesting.
Just like a NFL quarterback that I got a text from. Breathe, baby, breathe before a game. He was thinking about it and ready to do it because that was what was going to allow him to settle down and see his progressions. Young, new to the game. So works everywhere.
Right. And for you with the clients that you work with, it really doesn't matter if they're an elite athlete or if they're an executive or a mom or dad who's just wants to be more mindful in their household.
That's right. And, I'm thinking back to what we're talking about daydreaming. There's a violinist that I was working with, and we were talking about the daydreaming. She said, imagery, I learned, in university, I was told if you have a 50-minute concerto, you better do the imagery for that full 50 minutes and try to see everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And did you do it? She said, well, no. I said, well, of course. Who would? Chop it down, cut it down, make it usable, make it actionable. It's actually, if you do it little bits more frequently, that's what's going to make you better. Not this have to go and study my mental skills.
Yeah. And the repetition and like you said, actually doing it, because I think that that's the thing is people find it overwhelming.
It's true, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They think it's this big issue that I'm not good enough if I have to think about this. It should just come naturally to me. I'm great at this sport or great at this job. This should just happen for me. Well, that's not how it happens for the best.
And so many pieces come into play that we talk about many of the athletes that we work with. And I say so much of it is timing in your life as well. And I wonder if you find this with the athletes that you work with, and especially we find in track, it comes down to who's healthy on that day, who's not sick, who had a good night's sleep. We saw this at the Paris Olympics with Noah Lyles. He went in so favored for the 200 meters. There was no one even really thinking that he wouldn't get the gold medal on the 200 meters. The 100 was a different story. But lo and behold, he ends up with COVID. And not that any of that piece is controllable, but I think as a general rule for everyone is, what's your plan? And then what's your plan in adversity? Like how resilient is your plan based on what could happen around you? And, and then doing the reps on the plan. Like, so you know what you're coming in to do. You've done your daydreaming or your short little visualizations. You're ready to go, but you've also put a lot of the pieces into place with sleep, nutrition, all those things, so that you're showing up physically and mentally the best, I guess is the name of the game. What do you think
for
about
sure.
that?
I think, all that circle of care stuff is very important. Of course, nutrition, like all of that. But of course, I'm coming at it from my perspective. And I think the mental side is underutilized.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people shy away from it especially when you get really good at something. It's the one thing that can elevate you the most.
Right. Yeah. You can only train physically so many hours.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you can do all of that. And if you don't, as they say, show up in the moment, even though you're able, you're not going to be happy or get what you want. Right.
Presumably, like all skills, some people are just naturally better at some of the things that you work on than others. It doesn't mean that because you can jump high, you don't train on jumping. So I think that no matter what, but presumably all those people that you work with, there would only be a small fraction of people that would already be good at the psychological performance piece, or is everybody in need of it?
Well, I wouldn't say everybody is in need of it. I think everybody can use it and utilize it to better their performance for sure. But, you know, I wouldn't want to say, well, everybody needs it. It's just everybody can get more out of themselves
Mhm.
if they use it. But they don't have to use it. You can pick and choose. You don't have to use it all and go full on. I'm a big believer in just cherry picking some things that apply to you, and off you go.
And so, one question I have for you is around this idea of success. So, obviously, if you're going to the Olympics, the ultimate success is winning a gold medal. Or if you're on a professional team, it's winning your league, whatever that might be. Those are the easy things to understand as pieces of success. But I'm guessing that there's other elements of that. If you don't get the gold medal, that you can still be satisfied that you had a successful.
Considering most people don't get the gold medal,
Yeah.
right? And actually, one of your previous guests, Heather Bansley, she said something very interesting to me once, and it was actually going into Paris, and they had such I guess, challenges thrown at them in the year that they were trying to qualify. They had a year, 11 months to qualify. I mean, who does that? They did at the last minute. Oh my goodness, right? But she said in the end, I can't get caught up in winning or losing. I have to just do what I do, get the most out of myself, and be happy with that. I thought, right on. If you get the performance out of yourself, if you do well for yourself, if you can stay calm and stay focused, you're going to get results the best you can do for you. You're going to be satisfied. It's what it's all about. That's how to do it.
Probably easier for people who are a little older, a little more experienced than young.
I don't think so.
That's good
I
to
think
know.
that's a good point to make. I actually don't think so.
So it's just the younger athlete, the 20-year-old basketball player that came into your office in the NBA combine was that person needs to, oh, this is just like if I'm going to do physical training, this is a thing that I can do for my mental training that's going to help me to achieve all my.
To get the best that I can out of myself. I mean, it doesn't mean not everybody's going to be world number one or even great, but you can be satisfied with what you're pulling out of yourself. And again, if you're trained up and all that's great and you don't do it on the day, often that's mental, besides the things that you pointed out, right? And that's what that's a hard one. That people struggle with that because they know they could do it, but they backed off or they protected themselves and they didn't step up and do it. That's what training some of the mental skills or approach will help you do.
I heard a really interesting study of athletes that said that if you have fun while you're competing, your performance can improve up to 30%. And I've been using it with a lot of the people that I work with because ultimately, like what Heather said to you, that is in many ways what got us to the levels that we got to. And that idea of this is fun for me. And these moments are very, ultimately, I love them. They're fun.
When they're
I,
going well.
yeah, when they're going well, for sure. I remember when the NHL hockey strike was on, we were at an event with Steve Stamkos and we were just chatting and he was so interesting because seems to be a incredibly focused person, obviously has had huge amounts of success. This was when he was a younger player. He wanted to be back on the ice so badly, only for the reason that he loved being on the ice playing, that he was going to go to Europe and go play there because he basically said to us, I can't stand sitting around my house and not playing hockey. And it was interesting because we deal with a lot of athletes and you could feel from him that was 100% genuine. Like he was basically like, I hate being at this party. I hate doing all these other extra things in my training without being in an actual game. And I think that it's such an interesting word. And it's something that I think we lose when we talk so much in detail about your macro and your micro and your 9 hours of sleep, is that I really hope you're having fun, when you're out there doing all those things. Have you noticed that with the people that you work with, that fun and success are kind of related?
Well, I think what I've noticed mostly, remember, say with Stemco's, this is what he does. This is what he's very good at. This makes him feel good.
Right.
So he
He
wants to go
gets
do that.
accolades. Yes,
It's part of his identity. So
For
when
sure.
you're really good at something, you want to do it.
For
of
sure.
course. And then
sure.
when you're successful, oh, how fun is that? Right.
Right.
So I think what I've noticed with the fun part is sometimes people will say to me in my office or on the sidelines, whatever, well, I just need to have fun and I'll be okay. And I'm like, hold on. If you don't actually get to the thing that will allow you to get the results to have fun, it's not going to happen. So back it up.
Mm-hmm.
And let's start with just being able to get calm-ish so you can think out there, do your thing. Then guess what? All that comes. It's like the concept of confidence. It's the same thing. Everybody talks about confidence and how they need it and you have to have it and you have to believe and you have to trust. And I say, no, you don't. It's overrated. You might want to feel that way. Great. I hope you do. But if you don't worry about it. Let's just calm it down and get to that task. And guess what? After you get the results or you're doing okay, you'll start to feel more confident. It's that way around, not confidence first.
Right.
And we get that wrong all the time.
Because you're going to, everybody falls into a slump of some sort.
Or you just you drift and you get caught up with distractions and worries.
Right.
Oops, I'm no longer doing what I should be doing.
Right.
Oops, where was I supposed to be? Oh, I'm 5 feet off my mark or whatever. Right.
So less about a slump and more about distraction.
Exactly. Why are you in a slump?
Right.
Where's your head?
Where there's a reason you're in a slump.
Yeah. What's going on?
So I saw this clip. There's actually this morning, Salah, who's one of the world's best soccer players. He was talking about this fun component. And one of the things that he talked about, which was interesting, is as a younger player, the stuff that was going bad around him, team, other players, whatever it might be, would, now that you say this, clearly pull him into a distracted mindset. And he wouldn't have fun because the stuff, like the media's on the team or the manager or whatever, like bad stuff is swirling around this team, not necessarily have anything to do with him, but it made it not as much fun. So he said what he learned is that stuff comes and goes. It's all like you're going to go into these phases where, there's a bunch of crap going on, the politics of the world, the leadership of the women's soccer team, like whatever it is, there's stuff going on that will pass. So don't worry about it because it's going to be gone. There's no use getting sucked into that if it has nothing to do with you. Just stay on task.
What can you do? Because if you execute the way you think you can, or as close to the way you think you can, how are you going to feel? Pretty good.
Yeah.
Isn't that a pretty good way to take care of, nourish your mental wellness, etc., and play well? Sure is. So I like people to spend a bit more time thinking about what they might need mentally, not the whole shebang, but what they might need skill-wise to be able to get to feeling good about what they do, performing well. It's a great way to move through life if you're performing well at work, at home, as an inmate, whatever.
What are your thoughts about time off and recovery? And I'm thinking in all those instances that you described, maybe not the inmate because they don't get as much time off as the rest of us, but like, so say an executive that is working, 50-ish, 60-ish hours a week, an athlete, what would psychology say is very important for a mental break? Like, how much do you need? What do you need to do during that time to be the best when you come back to your demanding?
Good question. I think that depends on the individual, for sure.
Mhm.
And I think you have to know what your hotspots are, your
Right,
weaknesses,
okay.
what's going to tip you over, what's going to push you into burnout, right?
Got
It
it.
could be personality things. I'm taking on too many details. I need to do this because I'm the best at it, or I should be doing this. No, you don't do this. I'll take it on myself.
Got it.
That's a big issue,
Right.
right? So knowing, maybe it could be you don't take action. You're just a naturally cautious person and you sort of don't want conflict or you don't want confrontation. So you don't tell the boss what they should know, whatever. So you need to know maybe I need to learn to take a bit more action in that situation. Maybe I need to learn to listen a little longer when I'm dealing with this person. I need to be able to divest and, delegate to people so that I don't have this pile of things that I don't really have to be doing. I just feel good doing them because I'm good at them. Those types of things, you have to know what kind of tips you over a little. And then you can use a couple little skills, have a little plan to avoid it when you come back, to change it up. And again, it's not a personality change. No one's going to change, but we can all change in certain situations for a certain amount of time and then go back to the wonderful us.
Okay, so I have one more question, and it's around starting something that you want. So I've got this thing I want to do. I just keep either false starting, or I just don't even kick it off. I just know I want to do it, but I don't seem to have the motivation to do it. How do you get started?
Right. So first thing to look at, is it motivation or is it just avoidance, or is it what in that distracted hotspot category zone is it? Expectations, fear of failure, self-critical, negative self-talk, worried what others are going to think, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of them that we can all tick off. Figure out what that is. Am I just afraid it's not going to work? Do I just don't think it's a good idea? I just don't really want to do it. I mean, motivation can tell us a lot, right? I'm not motivated. Well, is that because, I'm afraid I don't want to do it? Or is it because it's really not that meaningful to me and I need to move on to something else? I need to quit that one and move on to the next.
Something that is a higher priority that
Yes.
tips me over to take some action.
Yes,
And that's, I think you talked a little bit about, pick your spots, pick the things that make the most
exactly.
sense. Could be small, doesn't matter. Just something that's
One or
interesting.
two, small. Give it a go. I mean, it takes courage to try to do this, right? We all have our ways of doing things, and we keep doing it the same way because we all have our default behaviors when the pressure's on. And I'm always talking about when the pressure's on, because when the pressure's off, they're fine. It's when the pressure's on, know what you think you should try to do.
When Dana has a challenge, you work through many difficult situations with many super high level, very high profile people. I'm thinking about the Argos heading into Grey Cup. They just lost their quarterback.
Yeah.
They still won.
Yep.
It was amazing. What technique? So say you're driving and you're like, now I need to meet with my Argos players. This is going to be a very difficult conversation. They're going to be freaking out. They just found out they don't have a quarterback. They've got a backup that was basically going to retire. What do you do for your preparation, self-talk, whatever it is? What technique do you use to say, okay, I'm coming to this conversation with my best Dana? What gives you that?
I think the most important things for me are, and I've mentioned them, but just taking a moment to slow down so that I can think. Because if I rush, I might not hear them. I might say something that's not really germane and irritating. Not that I ever say anything irritating, but being able to slow down is a big one. And then just that allows me to do my natural listening and to really try to hear what I'm hearing and ask questions. Ask them. I'm big on not necessarily telling people what to do and all of that. I want to hear what they think is useful. And then we get around to what their decision is going to be. Because if I can get somebody to talk to me, and that's just meaning listening, then they usually get to a good decision themselves.
You're just guiding them to, and you won't necessarily know, like the
No.
situation Stacy talked
No.
about, is you won't know what the thing is.
That's right.
And if you came in and said, okay, here's what you were going to do this time, this situation happened, here's the correct behavior, it may fall flat. So it's about pulling out of them what's most important.
Yeah. Making them think about it and talk about it in the moment. Now, I do sometimes say, hold on, I think you're on the wrong track. What about this? I don't buy that at all. So I do that as well. But
that's part of the digging too, right? Yeah.
And sometimes they just need to vent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they come up with it. Yeah. Okay. You know what? I got it. I'm good.
we have the best ideas inside ourselves in a way.
Got to do you.
Your job is to get them out and then I guess make them actionable.
Absolutely.
I love it.
It's been fascinating. We could go on and on.
I love this stuff.
We've got a lot more to talk about next time.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. These are, I really like, because of what we do and the people that we work with, and people are generally trying to move towards a better version of themselves. And I do think from our experience, this idea of psychological performance training, it's so legit. It's so needed because it's been ignored for a really long time. I'm fascinated by it. So appreciate you coming in to talk to us about it.
No,
It's great.
my pleasure. It's always fun, and you guys are always fun to hang with. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Totum Wellness Podcast. Please follow us on Apple, Google, or Spotify and leave a 5-star review and comment. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and please spread the word to family and friends.